Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be one of the tigers that I made for my tiger collection, and I just realized that it is actually the year of the tiger, so it was like good timing. But in this one I'm going to be going through how I made the orange tiger with a couple of more videos and tutorials over on my Patreon on how I did things for these tigers. But if you haven't already seen my sculpting video on how I sculpted the head, it is on my channel. I'll try and remember to link it below, but I never do. But it is on my channel if you want to see how I sculpted it. So I have sculpted it out of polymer clay to begin with, and it has glass cabochon eyes. So I have fired it, or I've baked it in the oven so it's nice and hard. The nose is made from Super Sculpey, so the beige coloured one, and it's really good for fleshy toned or beigey fleshy toned colours like noses and like gums and stuff, and inside the mouth. And the bulk of the body is sculpted from a Sculpey original, which is the softer white Sculpey you can get. So once everything has been baked in the oven, it's all nice and hard, and I can start painting all the areas that need to be painted. I also sculpted some feet for this as well, so I sculpted a set of 4 feet for this orange one and a set of 4 feet for the white one, so that took a little bit of time to sculpt each individual paw. But I am painting all of these surfaces that are going to be seen in just a black water-based acrylic paint. Nothing special, it's whatever your local craft store has. Mine is by the brand Armature, and it's relatively cheap. It's made here in Australia, but you can find something, like I said, in your local store that is comparable. So just going over all of the areas that need to be painted. I always prime my pieces before I apply any paint to it. So I use a canvas primer. It works really great to give it a good tooth for the paint to stick to, but you can use things like a car primer or different types of Mr. Sculpey, Mr. Super Clear primers and stuff like that, but I like to use just a canvas primer because it's really easy to find and cheap. So same deal with the feet. For these paw pads, because it is an orange tiger, the paw pads are going to be black. And then majority will be covered in the faux fur when I apply it anyway, but you have like you can see the little pads showing through that faux fur. For this armature, I have plenty of armature videos on my Patreon if you want to know more details, but I use a plastic ball and socket armature. You can find these armatures in my shop at creaturesandthat.com. I just did a fresh restock of them, but there is a limited amount of the smaller armature. This is a 1/4 scale, so the middle-sized armature that I have. I have rolls available as well as the tools and all of the little attachments that you need to create an armature. So for this body, I have felted the body. Again, tutorials will be over on my Patreon if you want to know a little bit more about the process of felting and armatures. So I've needle felted the body, and I prefer to needle felt the bodies because I find it provides like a better muscle tone underneath that faux fur that you apply. So I think you can get a more refined shape when you just do the needle felting and then applying I like to call it a skin over the top of the needle felted body. So the needle felting acts as like muscle tone, and you can really get lots of different definitions in the muscle tone. And then I like to call the faux fur the skin that you put over the top of the muscle tone. So I think it works in terms of the anatomy really well, and it really lets you define the piece a little bit more and sort of refine all the areas that need to be refined. So basically what I'm doing is the bulk of the body to begin with. So just cutting out a large section and cutting out the sections that need to be cut and wrapping them around the start of the legs, and then I'm going to be adding some individual pieces on the legs to create the faux fur for the legs. So I like to do the body first before I do anything, but the quicker way is to sew things on a sewing machine, much like a plush pattern, which works really well when you have practiced and refined the process a bit, and I usually create my own patterns when I do that. So if I'm creating a doll from a resin piece, normally I refine a body pattern that I can use for that piece over and over, so I don't have to needle felt the whole body again and again, because it really takes a little bit of time to needle felt that body and to get the dimensions and the muscle tone right. So that is the other option. I have plenty of videos on my channel that show how I do that, and I have some body patterns that I have retired over my Patreon as well if you want a free body pattern. So once I've pinned all of that bulk of the faux fur to the body, and I'm happy with the way it's looking, I can start sewing the main body up. So I use a ladder stitch to sew it up, and usually I use the correct coloured thread for it. You want to get yourself a good quality thread, preferably something that's thick, because you'll need to pull the ladder stitch quite tight, and if you have a really cheap crappy thread, chances are you'll snap it and have to re-sew all of the bits. But I use thread by Gutermann, it's really good, or I also have some upholstery thread that I find really useful to have around as well. I only have a black colour, but I've used most of the upholstery one for my bat collection that I did a little while ago, because I really need to pull that thread tight when I'm sewing the wings. But anyway, once I've sewn that bit up, I then glue the neck to the head by using some tacky fabric glue. It's nothing special. I find mine in the local craft store here called Spotlight. It's really good glue, dries really quickly. I usually leave it for a couple of hours to dry properly though, but it adheres really tough, and it's like you have to really rip it off if you want to get it off, but I find the adhesion is really nice. I've never had a problem with applying this to resin or polymer clay, so but always test out anything you put on resins and polymer clay to make sure they don't have like a weird reaction to your pieces. And same deal with gluing the feet together, so once that's been sewn up, I glue the legs to the feet. So for the ears, I have made these ears. I'm going to be doing a tutorial for my Patreon on how exactly I made these ears. They are gently posable with a wire armature inside it, but if you want to know more on how I made these ears, keep an eye out for that video that is coming on my Patreon, and I go through that little bit of a process on how I made them. So in the meantime, everything has been sewn up and I've given the tiger a really good trim, and it's time to add all of the colouring that I want to add to it. So it's going to be an orange tiger. I did spray paint this tiger. The white one I did by hand, well, the stripes by hand, but for this particular doll I needed to do spraying with my airbrush, and just because it's a large area and it needed to get that soft blending into the white areas and the orange areas. So I spray painted it. It's a little hard to film because it's only a small space and it gets fumey, and not so much fumey, but I'm using an airbrush and stuff. So next one I'll try and get some sort of footage, but basically I just airbrushed all of that orange tone onto it. I used an acrylic base paint that has been thinned down about 50% with water, and that way you can sort of embed it into your faux fur a little better. So I just gave it a little bit of a brush through while the paint is drying. Because it's been airbrushed, the paint will dry relatively quickly, but you just want to be careful where you're brushing that paint because you can smear it onto the white sections, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to have a nice clean little blend from the two colours. So I'm just going over all of the sections that have been painted just to refine it a little bit more, and then I can start adding the final little bits like the stripes, and that's when the doll really comes together. So I started off hand painting all these little stripes on the face to begin with, and then for the bigger ones I moved on to the airbrush to do all of those stripes. I'm using a fabric base paint. It's just a black by the brand Julie Jacquard, and I find this paint really useful to have. It's really good quality fabric paint, so if you can get your hands on some of them, then definitely check that out. Just going in and painting all those little smaller sections with a brush. I find the airbrush can be too random at times, and sometimes refined little tiny lines can be a little bit difficult to do. But it would have been fine with this airbrush if you have a really good quality airbrush. I've got an Iwater one that has a really fine ability to have a really fine tip to it. So I ended up going and doing the rest of the stripes with that airbrush, and you can really tell a difference between using an airbrush and an actual physical brush. I think the airbrush does a much cleaner job. It's just a bit more work to do it, but I think it's worth it at the end because it looks more ingrained and like part of the faux fur. So again, just giving it a really rough little comb through while it's drying, being really careful not to spread that black paint around because I want those stripes to be really defined. And adding the last little bit, which is some whiskers. I have a whisker tutorial in my shop as well if you're interested in that. But that's pretty much the little bit of a process on how I made the tiger doll. This little one is available in my shop at the moment. Payment plans are also welcome, so head over to creaturesofnight.com and check that out. You can find her there as well as other pieces from that collection. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. You learned a little bit of thing or two. Tigers are my favorite animal, so I really enjoyed making this little collection. But yes, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share and all that stuff. It really helps my channel. Check me out on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, creaturesofnight.com. And thanks to my patrons for supporting me. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!